Hey there everyone, Alexander Love here, and in this video what I'm going to explore is the myth of separation and the spell of feeling broken. So let's begin with looking at what is a myth. A myth can be understood as a sacred story, a certain kind of story that is imbued with meaning, that's imbued with lessons, that's imbued with possibility should we decide to lean into the story deeply, with curiosity, with care, with a heart that is open and curious. Human beings are living within the myth of separation, a sacred story that is uniquely gifted to human beings who have self-reflection. And really, most human beings have some degree of self-reflection, except maybe newborns, which are at the very foundation of human becoming, and we could think of as a transition from the animal world. So we can understand that the human experience is one in which we are exploring together this sacred gap between that which is knowing and that which is known. Animals don't, for the most part, don't have this gap. A cat is just a cat. A stone is just a stone. A tulip is just a tulip. They are who they are 100% with no distance. And it's in this distance that we can ask the question, who am I? Why am I here? And what am I going to do about it? The answers to these questions are vast. They're varied. And together they weave our human story. This exploration of, on the one hand, this incredibly unique capacity to look at ourselves, to look at each other and wonder. But at the same time, this sacred gap creates in us an experience of separation. And there are moments in all of our lives when we fall under the spell of separation. The spell of separation is when we forget that we are co-creating this majestic human story, this myth of self-reflection. And instead we lose ourselves in the pain of feeling broken, as if we're walking around with broken wings, and even though we wish to fly, we walk as if we are crumpled, fractured, broken apart. And from this spell of separation, suffering emerges, war emerges, our sense of feeling divided foregrounds. And we find ourselves in a world with so many unnecessary tears. The tears that are caused by our sense of brokenness and division. And so the invitation here is that one way for us to awaken from this spell of separation is to step back just a couple inches and look deeply into who we are as human beings, to recognize that in fact there is a sacred story we are weaving, one in which includes this experience of separation. For if we didn't have self-reflection, we wouldn't experience separation. We wouldn't have a spell to fall into. And so even though many of us experience such deep pain, a longing for union, a longing for wholeness, and when we look out into the world, it's common that we see so many examples of being broken apart and fractured. And this can set all of us into a whole number of directions of hopelessness, disenchantment, other forms of suffering. Through the very recognition that experiencing separation is part of the point. It is part of the sacred gap that allows us to shine our light on ourselves, on one another, on this world, and ask the deep questions that supports us in weaving this larger story that we have been weaving for hundreds of thousands of years. That even though that sense of fracture that we experience some of the time is painful, and even though there are moments when it stings beyond measure, it is a feature of being part of an incredible co-creation, creating the myth of separation, the sacred story of us, the sacred story of what it means to be human, which is always a story of pain and awakening, of falling into new possibility.